I'm Tina Srabotniak. I'm acting head of programming here at the Appel Salon. I'm so happy to see such a great crowd here tonight for an evening honoring the works of First Nations icons Lee Maracle and Thomas King. During the month of June, the library celebrates the culture and heritage of Inuit, First Nations, and Métis people at library branches across the city. I'd like to thank our sponsor, TD Bank, whose funding makes this festival possible. And I'm going to introduce somebody you may know a little bit about, a guy called Joseph Boyden. He has written a few pretty decent books. His first book, 3-Day Road, got rave reviews, of course, and won the Rogers Trust Fiction Prize. His second, Through Black Spruce, won the Scotiabank Giller Prize, and the Orenda was named the winner of the 2014 edition of Canada Reads. He's also a teacher, an essayist, a world traveler. I'm so very pleased to introduce Joseph Boyden.
Amazing turnout. This is what we need. This is beautiful. Ani, bonjour, hello. This is going to be a beautiful night, and I think we all know that. It's a beautiful evening, and two very powerful people we're here to recognize tonight. But first, I want to recognize the land where we gather today, the Mississaugas of New Credit. Chimigwech for bringing us together in this beautiful land at this beautiful time of year. I think the best way to begin the night is to do something very special. We're going to do a grand entry this evening to honor Tom King and Lee Maracle. And the grand entry is meant to, it's a high honoring of the people that we are going to honor tonight, and it is going to be a place it's a drum beat. It's going to be the drum. It's going to come from the heart of Turtle Island. It is a welcoming for all of us to come together, to surround them in our love and in the light that they shed, and the light that we shed back to them. So without further ado, I'm going to ask you all to stand for the grand entry this evening. The Snake Island drummers are going to come in, and they are going to welcome us in the proper Anishinaabe way of Turtle Island. So Chimigwech. Chimigwech, Snake Island drummers. And here are the people of the evening. Look at Julie. And Thomas, the always nattily dressed Thomas King. These are two of our greats, two of our true greats in this country, not just for Indigenous people, but for all of us. And what an honor it is. And I'm going to kick things right off. And again, Chimigwech to the dancers and drummers. I'm going to bring up two brilliant young Kwe to speak on behalf of somebody very special tonight. First, I want to introduce the academic, the artist, and the activist Susan Blight from Couchiching First Nation in Treaty 3 country. And I'd also ask the brilliant author and poet Leanne Simpson from Alderville First Nation, Anishinaabe Nation, to come up and to speak about our first guest a little bit.
Ani Bojo, Mikanak and Dotem, Couchiching and Donji, Susan Blight, an Indigenous cause, Shaganashi Winakazoyan. So I am Snapping Turtle Clan from Couchiching First Nation, a citizen of the Anishinaabe Nation of Treaty 3, and my English name is Susan Blight. And I have the great honor of speaking to the work tonight of Thomas King. In a 2012 Globe and Mail profile, Mr. King said, "I dislike talking about myself. It's boring. I've heard all the stories before." Well, tonight I have the honor of talking about Thomas King, so he doesn't have to do it himself. Thomas King writes novels, genre fiction, essays and lectures, radio and film scripts, plays, poetry, nonfiction, children's literature, and if we're lucky, a musical. He also works in photography. This is not an exhaustive list. Moving between styles and disciplines is difficult for most of us. But in a 2009 interview, Thomas explained, "I mean, you're just telling a story with what you're doing. I take a picture, I'm telling a story. I write a poem, I'm telling a story. So as long as I keep it in that storytelling mode, I'm okay, and the transitions aren't difficult." From that same 2009 interview, Thomas makes the following point, casually summarizing one of the incredible accomplishments of his work and career. And the quote is, "If I have any obligation at all, it is to write well and help out the next generation of writers who are coming along, either by example or by talking with them. I think good work carries over to other writers. It helps in the publishing industry because if you have a native writer who is writing and selling, the next native writer who comes along who's got some interesting looking stuff, while the publishing house might take a chance on them, whereas in the past they would not, just simply wouldn't." Thomas King uses humor to address tragedy, a tactic that makes his work both accessible and stealthy. He makes us laugh, and we lower our guard. He invites us into the kitchen table for a friendly chat, and we feel our shoulders relaxing. He talks to us in a way that makes us put away our defenses and our guilt, and then he tells us a story, a real good story. One that makes us think and feel, and here's the stealth, change, makes us adapt and grow. He has done this for hundreds of thousands of Canadian and global readers, subtly orchestrating this space for change, and we as Indigenous people have a better world to live in because of it. Some of the awards that Thomas King has received include the Order of Canada. He was selected to give the Massey Hall Lectures in 2003, Canada Reads Selection, McNally Robinson Aboriginal Book of the Year winner, RBC Taylor Prize, Governors General's Award, plus innumerable nominations, shortlists, and recognition for his work. Prolific is an understatement. It's a career that is expansive, a pillar of excellence, and it's ongoing, and that's why we're all lucky. Thomas, we thank you, we honor you, and we anticipate what you will give us next. Shumigwech.
Anin Bojo Kinawaya, Gitagabiju Nadenawema, Alderville First Nation Nadonjaba, Nagojawang Megwadoda, Betasimasak Nadijnakaz, Nagichinendam Gibijayan Gibim Wachanguk. I'm so happy to be here visiting with you tonight. Wow. I wouldn't exist as a writer without these two. This community that's gathered here to honor these two writers, the Indigenous writing community, wouldn't exist without these two brave, rebellious, talented, excellent artists who have given us so much for so many years. I think one of the most profound things that I learned from them was not craft, both from an Indigenous perspective and also from a writing perspective, but was the ability to hold up emerging writers, to teach emerging writers, to listen to emerging writers, and to take that value of holding our community up as they walk through life and as they walk through their career. So I'm tremendously, profoundly grateful to these two souls, and I'm so happy to be here sharing the stage with them tonight. I was asked to pick my favorite Tom King story to read, which is kind of a mean task. But I decided on A Short History of Indians in Canada. Can't sleep, Bob Haney tells the doorman at the King Eddie. Can't sleep, can't sleep. First time in Toronto, says the doorman. Yeah, says Bob. Businessman? Yes. Looking for some excitement? Yes. Bay Street, says the doorman. Bob Haney catches a cab to Bay Street at 3 a.m. He loves the smell of concrete. He loves the look of city lights. He loves the sound of skyscrapers. Bay Street. Smack. Bob looks up just in time to see a flock of Indians fly into the side of the building. Smack. Smack. Bob looks up just in time to get out of the way. Whoop. An Indian hits the pavement in front of him. Whoop, whoop. 2 Indians hit the pavement behind him. Holy cow, shouts Bob, and he leaps out of the way of the falling Indians. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Bob throws his hand over his head and dashes into the street and is almost hit by a city truck. Honk. 2 men jump out of the truck. Hi, I'm Bill. Hi, I'm Rudy. Hi, says Bob. Businessman, says Bill. Yes. First time in Toronto, says Rudy. Yes. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Look out, shouts Bob. There are Indians flying into the skyscrapers and falling on the sidewalk. Whoop. Mohawk, says Bill. Whoop, whoop. Couple of Cree over there, says Rudy. Amazing, said Bob. How can you tell? By the feathers, says Bill. We got a book. It's our job, says Rudy. Whoop. Bob looks around. What's this one, he says. Holy, says Bill. Holy, says Rudy. Check the book, says Bill, just to be sure. Flip, flip, flip. Navajo. Bill and Rudy put their arms around Bob. A Navajo. Don't normally see Navajos this far north. Don't normally see Navajos this far east. Is she dead? Nope, said Bill, just stunned. Most of them are just stunned, said Rudy. Some people never see this, said Bill. One of nature's mysteries, a natural phenomenon. They're nomadic, you know, said Rudy, and migratory. Toronto's in the middle of the flyway, says Bill. The lights attract them. Bob counts the bodies. 73. No, 74. What can I do to help? Not much anyone can do, said Bill. We tried turning off the lights in the building. We tried broadcasting loud music from the roof, says Rudy. Rubber owls, asks Bob. It's a real problem this time of year, says Bill. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Bill and Rudy pull green plastic bags out of their pockets and try to find the open ends. The dead ones we bag, says Rudy. The live ones we tag, said Bill. Take them to the shelter, nurse them back to health, release them in the wild. Amazing, says Bob. A few wander off, dazed and injured. If we don't find them right away, they don't stand a chance. Amazing, says Bob. You're one lucky guy, said Bill. In another couple of weeks, they'll be gone. A family from Alberta came through last week and didn't even see an Ojibwe, says Rudy. Your first time in Toronto, says Bill? It's a great town, says Bob. You're doing a great job. Whoop. Don't worry, said Rudy. By the time the commuters show up, you'll never even know the Indians were here. Bob catches a cab back to the King Eddie and shakes the doorman's hand. I saw the Indians, he says. Thank you, says Bob. It was spectacular. Not like the old days. The doorman sighs and looks up into the light. In the old days, when they came through, they would black out the entire sky.
Yes, indeed, the amazing Tom King. It's amazing to hear that story. I've heard Tom read that story, and to hear Leanne read it it's a beautiful difference. And it speaks to Tom's words, how they can be at one point when Tom reads a story, people are laughing uproariously, and then realizing, maybe I shouldn't be. And then when Leanne reads it in her beautiful voice, it's like, yeah, no, maybe I shouldn't be. It was beautiful reading in Susan and Leanne Miigwech. That was amazing. It's now my great honor, actually, to introduce somebody who's a very old friend of mine, Mark Cote, publisher and writer. He is the publisher of Cormorant Books, the award-winning Canadian press. Mark and I have a long history. He was the first one he discovered my writing and was the first man to give me a chance and publish my first book, Born with a Tooth. So it's a really special honor and occasion to get to welcome me up tonight. And then also the amazing Cherie Demeline, who has put this together and who works tirelessly behind the scenes and is an author in her own right, a brilliant writer and person to, if you haven't read her work yet, you will be. Many of you already have. And Cherie gives of herself in a way that I've never really met too many people who are able to do that. She's a beautiful soul in person. Of course she is, because she's Métis from Georgian Bay. So I'd like to welcome Cherie and Mark to the stage to introduce Lee Maracle.
You're a tough act to follow. I'm Mark Cote, as Joseph said, and it is my great honor to speak about Lee Maracle, who came into my life several years ago in a rather lovely way. She brought with her a manuscript. But I'm going to read the speech that I prepared for this. Who is Lee Maracle? Daughter and granddaughter, sister, wife, mother, grandmother, stand-up comic, author, critic, teacher, elder, holder of honorary doctorates, recipient of the J.T. Stewart Voices of Change Award, the America Book Award from the Before Columbus Foundation, and the Ontario Premier's Award for Excellence in the Arts. Born in Vancouver, Indian by definition of the Canadian government, mid-20th century. Since that time, Lee has been at the forefront of activists who do not accept the nomenclature of Europeans and who demand that the colonizers recognize their chosen names. She is today a proud member of the Stolo Nation. According to the Canadian Encyclopedia, Lee grew up in a poor neighborhood called North Shore Mudflats. Lee's laughing because she knows what I'm going to say. I take exception to this. I grew up in the same neighborhood. Lee's mother's house was halfway up Frome Mountain on Dempsey Road in Lynn Valley. Little mud, no flats, and certainly not a poor district of Vancouver. My parents' house was a little ways down the hill from Lee's mother's, and it's a neighborhood composed of bankers, doctors, lawyers, and teachers. Lee's entry in the Canadian Encyclopedia serves to illustrate two of the most important points I can make about the astonishing woman we are honoring this evening. She challenges preconceptions and evades expectations. This doesn't mean she's devious, although if you know her, you know this can be true. What it means, more importantly, is that Lee is authentic in her person and in all her work. Authenticity is hard to describe. It is exactly what it is. But we need to define an aspect of Lee's life and art because we're honoring her here in the world's busiest library system. We're honoring her for her poetry, her fiction, and nonfiction, all of which have been well received, sold in respectable numbers, and are taught in the classrooms of primary schools and colleges across Canada. In addition to honoring her for her work, we are honoring her for her mentoring and for her teaching. I'd like to tell a joke that's going to help make my point. What's the difference between God and a publisher? God never thought he was a publisher. To this can be added a truth universally acknowledged. Few publishers ever thought they were editors. And as for those publishers who are both publisher and editor, we're a very special breed. To be an editor requires a very strong personality. Writers often find their editors very intimidating when it comes to working on early drafts of their novels. Not so Lee Maracle. Working on Celia's song with Lee was terrific. The editing process, for those of you who are not familiar with it, can be arduous. It's difficult for both parties, but to be honest, it's most difficult for the writer whose book has been pulled apart like so many Lego blocks and is being put back together again by another child, one who frequently displays the qualities of a bully, I would say. At a point in our editing process, I suggested that a paragraph in Lee's novel was redundant. No, Mark, it's not a repetition, Lee said in a very particular voice she has. I disagreed. She disagreed back. I explained how the paragraph was redundant. Lee explained how it wasn't. What I had read as repetitive and unnecessary was, in fact, important to the fabric of her story. To remove that paragraph would be to rend the cloth. I paused. Here was an example of how a European mind would read Lee's writing, and an example of how she, as a First Nations storyteller, had to tell her story. Not an impasse, but emblematic of the dialogue that Indigenous peoples and our colonizing governments have been having for some 400 years. After further discussion, I agreed with Lee. She could keep the paragraph. Lee agreed to rewrite the paragraph so that it would be true to her art, but not read as a reiteration. This, I believe, is the key to Lee's life and all her work. She wants to write and speak, but she demands to be read and to be heard. She's willing to go the extra mile to ensure that her stories are true and to ensure they're understood. This, I believe, is also key for something else. We of European descent, the colonizers, perhaps her primary intended audience, need to be open to reading and hearing what's been written and is being said by this important writer and by all Indigenous writers. Perhaps this is the template for how our government should move forward in their long overdue and necessary reconciliation with our Indigenous peoples. And this, I believe, is why we are honoring Lee. Celia's Song is a novel that challenges both Indigenous readers and non-Indigenous readers. It is every bit as fierce and fearless as the woman who wrote it. In its pages, Lee does not shy away from addressing and describing the complexities that perplex and vex her West Coast brothers and sisters. But the novel poses more questions than it answers. And that, chief among the many things I have learned from Lee, is this: there are no right answers. There are a few right questions, but we only trip over those if we ask many and listen to all responses. I began this speech with a question. Tonight, I hope it was one of the few right ones. Who is Lee Maracle? She is the astonishing woman and writer whose life and work we are honoring. She is someone we would do well to read closely and listen to with our hearts.
Ani Bojo, I'm so incredibly pleased to see you all here. Thank you so much for starting us in a good way, my brothers and sisters, and actually my daughter. Thomas and Lee, it It is such an honor to be standing on a stage with you. Yesterday we went to dinner, and at one point I was sitting with Susan Blight across from Lee and Helen and Thomas, and I said, Susan, do you realize that's Thomas King and Lee Maracle? And they're sitting across from us eating crab cakes. Like, how is this our life? It was just so beautiful, and it speaks to something that my cousin Jesse Thistle reminded me of. I said, isn't this an incredible evening? And he said, you know what, you said it once. You said, we're so blessed. We are in this blessed place in history because we have all of these stories coming up, and we still have our royalty with us. And not very many communities can say that, and so the Indigenous writing community can, and we are truly in a blessed moment in history. So I have a brief reading. I have a brief reading from Memory Serves, Oratories from Lee, because then I want to tell a story that she told me. We still have our original cultural bundles. We still have our original concepts of authority, but we lack, first, the space to affect them. Second, the time to restore the belief and trust amongst ourselves to accept them. And third, the time to reconstruct our systems. Indigenous people were oral. Knowledge keepers were trained rememberers. They were educated to recall the significant in what is said or done. If an action occurred which might impact the generations to come, rememberers were schooled to recognize it, track its history, identify its direction, and commit it to memory. Others, thinkers, were trained to examine the action and assure that the direction the nation took in responding to the event did not lead to a divergence from the original path. Indigenous leaders and thinkers accounted to community, clan, and nation in determining what actions to take in response to whatever challenge the nation faced. The confederacies responded to change as a whole. A village has no territorial authority over a nation, period. In one sense, time is irrelevant. It matters not a whit how long or short the distance between beginning and end of a journey is. It matters not a whit what the obstacle to reconnecting with this journey is. Whether or not we are free to take charge of the destiny of our nation, as citizens, we are still responsible for it. The time frame between this moment and the resumption of our duties is up to Canadians and their response to Indigenous calls for self-determination. On the other hand, time is critical. Humans require time and space to contemplate, to analyze, to foreshadow, to predict, and to make decisions. Every human being possesses the capacity for creation, consciousness, and curiosity at birth. People have a responsibility and an obligation to think deeply, to consider carefully, and to remain vigilantly curious when someone speaks, significant or mundane. The limited space currently occupied by Indigenous people does not change the space to which we are entitled. Canadians may believe we are no longer entitled to this space, but Canadian belief does not eradicate Indigenous claim to original space. Sometimes, to go forward, we need to return to the beginning. Lee Maracle. One of Lee's renowned quotes, and there are many, goes, and actually it was in this little book called The Inconvenient Indian, but we'll talk about that later. The quote goes, "How do you begin to tell someone their world is not the only one? Tonight I'm asking my mentor, my hero, my auntie, how do I begin to tell you that your world is the only one that I want to live in? I'll do my best." Lee told me a story once about the women in her nation, about sewing earth blankets. These are the blankets that were made to cover the children to keep them safe on the shore where the adults fished at night. And they fished at night because fishing was then illegal. Tell the Stolo fishing is illegal, and they'll find a way. And they did. But there were consequences. There were raids and there was danger. So the women sewed these blankets. The children would prop them up with sticks like a tent and play underneath, telling stories they'd heard from their parents. And when the officers or vigilantes would show up on the shores, the kids would pull up the sticks to be completely covered by the blanket, blending into the shoreline itself. To make these blankets, the women would go into the secondhand stores and fill bags with the biggest sizes of men's pants they could find, in muted colors like moss green and sandy brown. Then they would dump them out on the table, and the women would begin, ripping the seams, pulling apart to deconstruct them into fabric swatches, and they would tell stories about the men that wore these pants. Look at the hem on these ones. He must still live with his mother. Real shiny buttons on this pair, must be a banker. Look at the size of these ones. Boy, he enjoyed his mush. All the while stitching humor and story into a tool that was used to defend the children from violence, to keep them safe under a blanket of stories, safe from capture, safe to eat, safe to be stolo. And this is what Lee Maracle, this is what Lee Maracle does for us all. She forages for the useful in the discarded, the beautiful in the muted, the ferocious in the ordinary, the food in the night, and she weaves us a blanket to keep us safe. Lee shared something with me years ago when we first met, when we were working on a book. It's a teaching I haven't put down since, and I've carried it along with her to the Taj Mahal, to the shores of Lake Superior, and I think that's where I'll leave tonight with this small teaching that Lee gave me. Lee was once asked to deliver a speech that was reflective of her experience and time, and here's what she came up with. My life has been a long, slow journey over very jagged rocks, but God damn it if I didn't dance over every last one. Chimigak.
I think the Indigenous people of Turtle Island know this, that we are a patient people, and we can wait for the tides, and we do wait for the tides, and I believe the tides are changing. The tsunami that is a lot of the pain of this country is starting to recede, and it's leaving on the beach the detritus, and it's time for all of us to begin beachcombing together and to build and start rebuilding again. If there's any symbol that this is truly happening in this country, it's that I get to introduce this next person, the Honorable Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs, Dr. Carolyn Bennett. I don't think, not that long ago, I'm trying to introduce that minister to this room, and it would have been crickets. There would have been no one to show up. There is someone to show up, and Dr. Bennett is here, and she's quite an amazing person, and it's my honor to introduce the Honorable Minister of Indigenous and Northern Affairs, Dr. Carolyn Bennett.
Well, thank you, and merci, miigwech, kuyanomik, masi cho. What an amazing honor to be included tonight instead of crickets. It's here on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of New Credit. I think my education means that I have come to understand the importance of ceremony, and to honor these two amazing people tonight, but with the grand entry and to have the drum, this is truly special, and I think all of us will never forget this evening that we were amidst giants and two serious national treasures. So it is. Accueillons chaleureusement les hommes, les femmes et les enfants qui se sont joints à nous aujourd'hui en grand nombre. Thank you, Joseph, for the introduction. And it's interesting in terms of people's journeys. I remember it wasn't that long ago that we were at an event where just before the Orenda was published, that you read to a group of allies and Indigenous leaders trying to come together to figure out what we do. And I don't think, well, everyone in the room, including Paul Martin, knew that they were part of something that they'd never forget. And Chimigwich for all you do. This winter, at the opening of Going Home Star, I realized, as you explained in Maclean's, that Indigenous writers don't just write books. They write ballets and operas and screenplays and the book for musicals. And so it is, again, this week in what we're trying to do with Indigenous Reads, that I am actually trying to read Joseph Boyden's poetry, La Poésie en Français, as well as Rosanna Deerchild's amazing poetry. So it's again, it's a journey for me to actually come to understand how we celebrate all of that. It's interesting that as we do this job of reconciliation and understand that how do we get on side the 96% of Canadians not from an Indigenous background, that we find these gems and these narratives that actually help people come along, if only they could be inspired to just pick them up and have a look. And you know, I think that for Tracy Lindbergh's Birdie to end up in Canada Reads and almost win, and I think that, again, that celebrating writers that have written lots of other things, but to finally put down a story is huge, and that transition from childhood into adulthood and the humor that seems to be part of educating gently, that actually can tell terribly painful stories in a way that people can hear and absorb it. So it is in an interview about the story, Tracy asked the question, what do reciprocal obligations look like? What happens when they're broken, and how do you rebuild? And, well, that is narrative, she said. And I think that what we are here celebrating tonight is that Indigenous authors give us those narratives. Then when they give us those narratives, they change Canada's narrative as well. And les auteurs autochtones contribuent à faire du Canada un milieu de vie encore meilleur. It's actually better, and it is about the future of this country, in that we actually have to have all Canadians understand this painful past and the legacy of colonization. So what these narratives do, I think, for all of us, is they bring hope to children, Indigenous and non-Indigenous children. They help preserve the culture and tradition and history. And as we say, this is the world we all want to be part of, not only on the Georgian Bay. But it is how we see our country, and I think that, I think you all know that these new relationships that I've had the privilege of having as a member of Parliament, as somebody given some responsibility, not only in public health, but now with the Indigenous file, that my new friends who are First Nations, Inuit, Métis, have actually changed my understanding of being a Canadian. That this actually is what changes lives, and it is those stories and those narratives that change. And it is forging those connections through the stories that is about the shared experiences and the experiences that were very different. And it is this job of reconciliation, this unfinished business of confederation, that we have to get on with as we look forward to the next 150 years of this country. So as you all know, we're celebrating National Aboriginal History Month. National Aboriginal Day is only a couple of weeks away. Hopefully by next year it'll be National Indigenous Day. But what we've been excited by is that just tossing off an idea of making June Indigenous Book Club Month has blossomed into a national conversation. And I do want to recognize Barbara Henderson, William Lloyd here, that it was Barbara that after our mutual friend, Dr. Brenda Zimmerman, died a year and a half ago, she came and was so upset that Brenda was upset about what we were going to do about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And she said, but everybody has a book club. Why can't they just read an Indigenous author 1 month a year and we could get on with this thing? And in terms of reconciliation. And so we're pretty excited when allies come forward with solutions, with ways of going forward where that actually can precipitate this kind of conversation. And I must say that hashtag Indigenous Reads has become this amazing source of recommendations and tributes to authors like those that we're honoring tonight. It's I think the public reaction and discussion has made one thing clear. It's about time. Il est grand temps que nous célébrons la littérature autochtone. So this flood of new Indigenous literature and of award-winning Indigenous authors and actually people reading books that have been there for a while, but people are now asking for them, going to libraries to get them, understanding that some of the books well, I'll talk a little bit about Lee's in a minute, but that you have to refresh that there were books, these unknown treasures that now people want to dust off and read. And so I guess I'm, like every single one of us here tonight, share the conviction that the simple act of reading and exploring art and learning from it is what will transform our society. It's what brings people together. That honest narrative that brings understanding, and although I'm not allowed to say it too often, eradicates ignorance, and that's what we're up against. As Thomas King said many times, the truth about stories is that's all we are, and I think that in The Inconvenient Indian, which his humor allowed us and allowed non-Indigenous people to hear the truth. I thank him forever about, after I read his book, I decided all my friends should read his book, and it solved my Christmas present problem for a couple of years ago, and he was so kind to agree to sign all these books. Well, I actually bought them, but he organized that I could buy them from the Guelph local bookstore, and that he would go down and sign them, and then the bookstore sent them all to me. And so that was, ever since then, I've had such a lovely time at Christmas. Just everybody gets an Indigenous author's book. This year they all got Wab Kinu's The Reason I Walk. One year I changed it up and gave them all a DVD of Eighth Fire. But tonight, I want to just thank Lee as well. Today the Prime Minister was at Women's College Hospital celebrating the new building, and I remember in the first fight for Women's College Hospital in 1989 that Lee's book, I Am Woman, had, I think, come out the year before. And I remember that we were challenged to recognize that, as she described, those of us fighting for women's college were all really white. We were, I think, elite white women was what some of the critics had said. Our board was pretty elite, and the women were pretty white. So I remember this week I went to try and find some of the line in it which said, we also thought we were feminists. There was no question about that. But we were challenged by Lee that feminist discourse must include the diverse discourse of writers that had been to date been relegated to the status of marginality. She went on to say further, the women's movement can only be a powerful movement in social change if it is inclusionary, not exclusionary. So I want to just say thank you. That even institutions like Women's College Hospital look very different today than they did then, and it's because of people like you, Lee. So I guess I'm just here to say Canada's a better place because of Thomas King and Lee Maracle, who chose to carry the stories of their communities to all of us, to promote Indigenous rights and expose the injustice. Celle-ci a contribué à nous montrer la voie à suivre. So, being bearers of culture, tellers of stories, champions of change, always with the community at heart, tonight we get to honor these two national treasures. Through countless books, screenplays, scripts, and speeches, both authors have helped us find ways to speak to one another, building bridges where none existed, dispelling stereotypes, and growing true reconciliation. For their incredible contribution to Canada's narrative, I'm humbled and proud to help honor them this evening. Thank you. Merci, miigwech, kuyanamik, marsi, masicho.
Indeed, this country is a better place, thanks to Lee Maracle and Thomas King. Next, I'm going to introduce our Minister of Indigenous Relations and Reconciliation for the province, David Zimmer, as well as the Deputy Minister, Deborah Richardson. They're going to present letters from Kathleen Wynne, our Premier, to both Lee and Tom.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's been a busy afternoon because 2 hours ago I was with where did she go now? Minister Bennett. Oh, there you are. We were in Ottawa doing things on the Indigenous file. I want to acknowledge that I'm here on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of New Credit. I want to pay special regard to the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. I'm very happy to have been invited to the Indigenous Writers Gathering today and to honor the writings of Lee Maracle and Thomas King. As authors, they have brought much-needed public attention to Indigenous history, cultures, and perspectives. Lee, Thomas, you help Canadians to learn about subjects that are not always included and have not usually been included in textbooks or talked about in television or even commented on in the media. This is a new phenomenon that we're experiencing. While Canadian governments attempted cultural genocide on Indigenous peoples, Thomas, Lee, and other Indigenous authors kept the shared history alive. Thomas, you wrote in your novel, The Inconvenient Indian, and I quote, "The least I can do is provide a little historical background so no one will feel left out when our story gets complicated," end of quote. You were right, very right. In many ways, the role of providing, quote, "a little historical background" was left to Canada's great Indigenous authors. Lee and Thomas encouraged us to gain a better understanding of Canada's shared 400-year history with Indigenous peoples. And you allowed us, and many of us, to learn about the realities of colonization, inequality, racism, and yes, the tragedy of residential schools. And Lee, you not only encouraged us to understand our shared history, but you also dared us to, quote, imagine something different. We are ready to listen. We are ready to act on your words. We have an obligation to do that. Last Monday, Premier Kathleen Wynne, joined by the opposition parties, and it was one of the few times that all three political parties were unanimous in this. The opposition parties invited Indigenous leaders from across the country, from across Ontario, including a residential school survivor. And the Premier offered her apology on behalf of the province of Ontario for its part in the residential school tragedy. And then the 5 Indigenous leaders were asked to speak. Regional Chief Day, the President of the Métis Nation of Ontario, the President of TIC, which is the Inuit organization, and the last person who spoke was a survivor of the residential school. And I was, and the rest of us in the audience, and the Premier wondered how he would deal with this. He was a man in his, I expect, about 70, early 70s. And you would expect that he would have a welling up of bitterness and anger. He touched on the tragedies and some of the details that occurred in the residential school, but then he took it to a higher plane, and I can't explain it unless you were there to hear it. But he built his remarks around the Premier's apology about his experience, and then looked to the future to how everyone could learn, and if they drew the right lessons from it, could become better persons. It was a very moving event, and one of the few times in the legislature, which is usually a raucous place, but you could hear a pin drop. You could hear a pin drop in that room. And the visitors' galleries were full. All the 107 members were there, and yet you could hear a pin drop. The Premier apologized on behalf of the government of Ontario for these dark, dark moments of the residential school system and for Ontario's silence in the face of the residential school system and for the colonial legacy that gave rise to it. And she apologized for the continued harm that this history has caused to those affected by that dark chapter. And at the same time, the Premier released a document entitled, quote, "The Journey Together, Ontario's Commitment to Reconciliation with Indigenous People." It was a plan that signaled Ontario's commitment to do better. It commits us to listen to Indigenous partners and influencers like Lee and Thomas as we shape the path forward to reconciliation. Because only by listening can we act on Lee's words. She wrote, the Premier, "As we lurch forward into a new future, different but the same, we will restore greatness again." So let us lurch forward together on this journey of reconciliation. It is events like this, it is conversations like this that will begin that long, difficult journey, but necessary journey. It's necessary for all of us. It's necessary for the country. Thank you very much.
Kwe, Wabano, Ugungas Kwe, Delewi, Winbegajuik, My name is Deborah Richardson, and I am the Deputy Minister of Indigenous Affairs here in the province. I'm from the Pabineau First Nation in New Brunswick, and it's a real honor to be here and to be invited actually by a dear, dear friend, Cherie Demeline, who we've known each other for a few decades now, and also to celebrate two, and I won't say legendary because that sounds old, two fantastic, exactly, and they're still alive, so legendary. As Indigenous peoples, our stories are so central to who we are as people. Our culture, our language, community knowledge are all embedded in the stories. There are ways, these are the ways that we build and sustain our connections to the land, to our people, between generations to one another. You know, when I was even reading these speaking remarks, I was thinking about within my own family. So I'm from the North Shore of New Brunswick, if anybody knows New Brunswick. And Eel River Bar First Nation is one of the most beautiful places I find in the planet. And it's on the North Shore of New Brunswick, and you can just smell the sea. So those who are from the ocean, you can just smell it. And there's lots of stories in our family around, baking clams in the sand. There's lots of stories, and we've actually brought our own children to this island called Heron Island. It's an island that years ago people used to live on, but there's lots of stories about traditional Mi'kmaq burials that happened there, and people were buried in the fetal position on that island. And I myself have gone to that island with our children to dig clams and to camp, and to share those stories and pass them on. And I didn't really even think about that until I thought about coming here tonight. The other thing that we did, I have a brother who's a writer, and he's an English professor. There's something really poetic justice, a lot of poetic justice about a First Nations man teaching the English in London, England, right? So he teaches at the University of Kent in Canterbury. But he's so smart. He's the smartest of the group of us. But he, when my grandfather was passing away, he went and he got a tape recorder and he taped his stories. And he probed him. He'd ask him, "Oh yeah, Grampy, tell us the story about, when you had to go get driftwood on the ocean and you had to pay for whatever you needed to buy." And we taped those stories. So, sometimes when I'm feeling reflective or feeling a little lonely, I listen to those stories, and hearing that voice and the laughter about those crazy stories, it gives me a warm heart. And so I really encourage everybody, if you have somebody who's older in your life, tape it. Ask the stories. Find out that connection about what they're telling, because that spreads that on. My kids can listen to those stories. So it's a really special thing. Indigenous literature carries this long tradition of storytelling across the globe. People across the globe are interested in our stories. And people around the world have felt that connection with both Thomas and Lee. They felt it, just like we all do. And at this time in Indigenous history, Minister Bennett and Minister Zimmer spoke about how powerful it is. The stars are aligning. You open the newspapers, you turn on the television, there are stories, and they're not negative stories all the time anymore. There are precious, powerful stories about our people doing really good things. That's exciting. It actually gives me goosebumps. It inspires me. Cherie spoke about a quote that Lee Maracle had, and actually one of Thomas's books. Where do you begin telling someone their world is not the only one? I love that. Right? They're using each other. And that, in part, is what these literary giants have made their life's work, ensuring that Indigenous worlds are seen, respected, and preserved through history. Our Premier also spoke in the legislature about the critical need for Indigenous language and culture, particularly at this time. And Minister Zimmer touched on some of the announcements that the Premier made when she made that apology. Some of those announcements were also about language and culture, so that writers and other people have access to some funding to be able to share those stories. It's not easy. It's easier when you're bigger names, right? But when you're just getting started, it's not. So being able to access that type of funding. I also would like to speak to the specific words that Andrew Wesley, who was a residential school survivor, spoke to in that legislature that day. It's not my fault. It's not our fault. Why should I reconcile with people? Why should I? That's what he traveled his life wondering. Why should I? It was only when his wife said, you know what, you need to reconcile. For you to move on, you need to reconcile. So he told a story about how he went up to the top of a mountain and he came back down and he forgave the people that did those things to him. There was not a dry eye in the place. In fact, I still get goosebumps thinking about the words of Andrew Wesley. No one needs to explain many of these things to Lee and Tom that work as trailblazers, innovators, leaders, and we owe a lot of gratitude to these literary elders, the ones who broke the ground and gave the space for people like Joseph, Cherie, the two dynamic young women that were speaking here this evening from Treaty 3 in Alderville. Amazing that we're sitting here with role models that we all look up to. So as a deputy minister, I'm grateful for the work that's surrounding us in strong culture and knowledge, but even more so as a Mi'kmaq woman. And as a mother, I'm really indebted to you for keeping us grounded, safe, and proud in your words. Miigwech Wilalin.
So Premier Kathleen Wynne is a huge fan of your writings. She wanted to be here tonight, but she's out of town. It's a very difficult situations that she's dealing with. So she asked me and Deputy Minister Richardson to present a note from her to each of you. She would have moved the world to be here tonight had she been able to, but she is a huge fan. She's an enormous supporter and has moved mountains on the Indigenous reconciliation piece. And I can tell you that she's doing that, driving that agenda for all the right policy reasons that you can think of. And she has some very, very personal reasons for driving the agenda too. So allow the Deputy and I to present this to you. Now you may think we're taking them back, but I was trying to read it and forgot her glasses. And so has asked me to read it to her and share it with the audience. So, come, Deputy, here, you read one. Go ahead.
Of course, I don't have my glasses either.
Oh. I have mine.
On behalf of the Government of Ontario, I want to congratulate Lee Maracle as the Indigenous community honors her achievements at the 7th Annual Indigenous Writers Gathering. Stories are a key part of our cultural identity. They preserve our people's history and help us understand our place in the universe. They pass down wisdom from our forebears and provide guidance and inspiration for the future. Indigenous stories are integral parts of our unique Canadian identity. These stories have made us wiser, stronger, and more passionate as a people. Tonight, proud members of the Indigenous community pay tribute to the bearers of their culture, tellers of stories, champions of change, and true community-minded people. Their success is an inspiration to young Indigenous people and Canadians from all cultural backgrounds, as we see here today. Maracle has built a formidable reputation as an international expert on Canadian Indigenous culture and history. She is, among many things, an award-winning novelist, storyteller, poet, and mythmaker. Through her work, she brought light to systemic injustice, promoted Indigenous rights, and showed us a way forward to true reconciliation. Congratulations on this very well-deserved honor, Lee. Indigenous communities across Canada and all the people of this great country are grateful for your legacy. Kathleen Wynne.
So the preamble for Thomas King is the same, except, and I'll just go directly to the Thomas King specific part. Thomas King is a writer, educator, and activist who has brought light to issues of Indigenous land and rights. His writings incorporate elements of both Native American storytelling traditions and traditional Western narrative. His work has brought light to systemic injustice, promoted Indigenous rights, and showed us a way forward to true reconciliation. Kathleen Wynne, Premier.
Miigwech, thank you to Ministers Bennett, to Minister Zimmer, and to Deputy Minister Richardson for your words. It means a lot. I'm walking away now, like, one of the images now I have is the two of you using each other. And I'm just, as a writer, maybe I'll just write about it. I'll keep it to myself right now. It's a real honor now to introduce somebody, my brother from another mother, my dear friend, my cuz from Wasauksing First Nations, the amazing writer and now home builder, and man extraordinaire, reporter extraordinaire for CBC, and a dear, dear friend who means a lot to me, Wab Rice.
Miigwech Joseph. Bonjour, Wabgijing Dijnikas, Makwat Nodem, Wasauksing Donjaba, Anishinaabe Minwa, Jagnashandao. Good evening, my name is Wabgijik. I'm of the Bear Clan. I'm from Wasauksing, and Wasauksing is the Ojibwe word for just up to 400. So it just came down tonight. I'm unable to express just how much of an honor and a privilege it is to be in the presence of these great titans of storytelling here tonight as we honor them. You've both influenced me since long before I was born. You helped create the person I've become, not biologically, but spiritually and culturally, obviously, right? I am a proud Anishinaabe today, due in large part to both of you and your decades-long fight for the inclusion of Indigenous voices in all realms. So for that, I say Miigwech. Thank you very much. So this is an honoring ceremony tonight, and it's only apt to perform an honor song for our auntie and uncle here. And honor songs are performed by the original cultures of this land everywhere to recognize and highlight the important contributions of individual community members and how they enrich our communities and make us stronger and bolster us. And the cultures across Turtle Island are beautifully diverse and vibrant, and as such, honor songs take on a lot of different words, a lot of different melodies, a lot of different stories, a lot of different rhythms. And but the underlying spirit to them all is to hold up these people, these great contributors to our cultures. And they can be performed to acknowledge young people on particular milestones, to welcome back warriors from battle, and to really highlight elders and what they've done to create a strong, vibrant community in each place that we live. So here tonight we have the Snake Island Drummers to perform an honor song, and I'd like to ask you all to please rise as we honor Thomas King and Lee Maracle. Chmiigwech.
Miigwech. This is how Thomas King reads on paper. Thomas King is a member of the Cherokee Nation and is one of Canada's most well-known and respected authors. He's an English professor emeritus at the University of Guelph and recently received the 2016 Blue Metropolis First Peoples Literary Prize. King was the first Indigenous person to deliver the prestigious Massey Lectures and is also the best-selling, award-winning author of 6 novels, 2 collections of short stories, and 2 nonfiction books. Back in 2004, Tom was awarded the Order of Canada. In 2012, his second nonfiction book, The Inconvenient Indian, won the National British Columbia Nonfiction Award and the Charles Taylor Prize. And in 2014, he was awarded the Governor General's Literary Award for Fiction for Back of the Turtle. He's done all right for himself. That's how he reads on paper. I don't know if Tom knows. I don't think he probably remembers the first time I met Tom. Thomas King. I was a young, wet behind the ears author. My first collection of stories, Maracle, had just accepted for publication. I was at some kind of literary event, and there is the physically imposing Thomas King standing in front of me. And I really wanted to say, hey, it's me, Joseph. You don't know me, but I hope you know me one day. And I walk up to him, and I don't know what to say other than, I think we have the same publisher in France. They're going to publish my story collection in France. And Thomas looks down at me, and he's like, oh, you mean, that guy Francis Chaffard? He's a great publisher. He loves that Indian stuff. Yeah, just bring him an eagle feather or something, and he'll love you forever. And I was like, oh, this is great. I jotted it down, and he looks me up and down and goes, you could use a good tailor. Let me introduce you. You're more importantly than this French connection. Let me introduce you to my tailor down on Bloor Street in York. And this is when I began to understand who Thomas King is as both the man, the legend, the trickster, the person. Today I was running by, remember I saw you on Bloor Street in Yorkville? I showed up with only t-shirts and jeans, I realized, and I was like, oh my God, I have to go and get an outfit for this. I'm running by them on the phone, with Kalumpa was there too, and I see them, I wave to them, and I run away, and I'm actually looking for an outfit to buy. This is why you never try to imitate Tom King. I went out on Bloor, and I found this outfit that made me look like Mr. Rogers, rather than the Tom King. So do not try to imitate. You can try to emulate, but do not try to imitate this man. You will just end up looking foolish. Thomas has meant the world to me, and I don't think he knows that for years and years I've read his work, and he has continually made me laugh, made me cry, has stunned me with what he says. His fiction and his nonfiction, he's one of those rare writers where he can juggle those two, and that's not an easy thing to do. But Thomas does that. And the Dead Dog Cafe, never mind, this incredibly rich... It goes on and on and on. He has, and what's most amazing about the man is that he always, despite his height, can still kind of disappear back and wants to. He doesn't want to be the center of attention, even though we all kind of crave that kind of charisma that he has, and to touch that spirit of him, he constantly pulls back. And I think a big part of that is his wife Helen as well, the brilliant Helen. The two of them, watching them together over the years has just been extraordinary. And he doesn't want the limelight, he pushes away from it, but when he is forced to be into it, he is a man of gravitas and of great passion. I'm going to share one very personal story, I think, that means a lot to me. Back in 2008, one of my novels was shortlisted for the Giller Prize, and they have this big fancy gathering, and it's aired publicly on television, and it's the most... I don't know why they make writers go through this. It's a brutal thing. But there's 5 writers chosen, and one of them is going to win the prize. And I was nervous as all shit. All night long, I was just a wreck. And, they have a dinner, and you're sitting at the dinner. I can't eat a thing. I was still smoking at the time. I was sneaking out to have a smoke. And Tom sees me come out of the bathroom at one point just before the prize is to be announced. And he said, Joe, come here. And he kind of pulls me to the side and says, it's all good. I got a song for you. I got a little heart song for you. And I was kind of giggling too, expecting something trickster-like. But then he proceeds to sing me the most beautiful song. And I could just feel the heart slow down to where it was supposed to be. And Tom sang me this song, and the rest of the world disappeared, and it was me just feeling the heartbeat. And my novel ends up winning the Giller Prize, and it's because of him. But he truly is, like Lee, Tom is the person who has to take the snowshoes and cut through and make that path first, and that's a tough path to make, so that the others of us can follow that path and sometimes deviate, but always find that path again. And if there's anything I can say about Thomas King, he is an idol, he is a dear friend, and he is one of the most amazing human beings and multi-talented human beings I've ever met. So, ladies and gentlemen, Thomas King.
Boy, I could sure use Joseph to sing me a song right about now. Joseph sells himself short. He has wonderful sartorial decision-making. I wish I had his body. Hey, that's the first time I've gotten a letter from the premier, and I thought maybe there'd be postage due. But I looked, and it's okay. It's also the first time that I've danced with Lee. That was kind of exciting, you know? Actually, I didn't want to be on stage tonight. I tend to be a painfully private person. Joseph's quite right. I don't care much for the limelight, even though I wind up in it more times than I want to be. And I even tried to bribe the drummers to let me sing on the drum with them so that nobody would notice I wasn't there, but they knew how desperate I was and how little cash I had on me, so that didn't work out so well. One of the nice things, in 1968, I think it was, I had just come back from about 3 years over in Australia, New Zealand, and the South Pacific Islands. Don't ask me why the record has been expunged. And when I got back, I suppose the ethnic movements in the United States in particular, but in Canada also, were underway. And I got involved pretty early on. But I didn't know, I didn't know anything about Native arts. And then a Kiowa guy, an unknown Kiowa writer named N. Scott Momaday, wrote a book called Housemaid of Dawn. It won the Pulitzer Prize. And I read that thing and I thought, my God, finally I know one Indian author. And then along came people like Leslie Silko and James Welsh, and I knew 3. And I actually knew them. I read them, I knew them, I knew every Indian author in North America during those days. There weren't that many. And then all of a sudden, slowly but surely, more voices began to come up. And every time they did, I'd buy a copy of their book, a first edition copy, and I'd stick it on my shelf. And I had this little wee bookcase, and I put those books on the shelf. And I had to build a bigger bookcase. And I kept putting those books on the shelf. And I had to put a bigger bookcase. I had to get an office for this damn stuff. And suddenly I realized that I couldn't keep up anymore, that there were more voices out there that had sort of come up, and that these were part of a continuum. That's the most important thing that I've learned about literature, is that it's not as though one generation takes over from another generation. It's that it's a continuum, that the writers who came before me, I followed them. I'm a part of that parade. The ones who come after me are the same way. and it just keeps building. And now, so far as I can tell, we've got better voices than the generation that I had, more powerful voices. And if you're sort of thinking, well, okay, well, we've heard Tom, and we've heard Lee, and we've heard Joseph, and now we can relax. Don't count on that, guys. And I think those voices that are coming along after us are going to be more powerful, perhaps more insistent, perhaps more humorous, but get ready. Get ready for them. It's going to be an exciting time. I won't be around to see that, but I can imagine it in my head, and it's a great pleasure. So thanks very much for this tonight.
And so this is how Lee Maracle reads on paper. Lee Maracle is a member of the Stolo Nation. She's the author of the critically acclaimed novels Raven Song and Daughters Are Forever. And if you've met Kalampa, then you know exactly what that title refers to. Her novel for young adults, Will's Garden, is taught in Canadian schools across the board. She's also published a book of poetry, Bent Box, and a brilliant work of creative nonfiction, I Am Woman. Her latest celebrated book is Celia's Song, published by Cormorant Books and Mark Cote. Mother to 4 and grandmother to 7, Maracle is a core member of the University of Toronto's Truth and Reconciliation Committee, where she also teaches and advises and is a senior fellow of Massey College. Indeed. Several. Maracle recently received the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal for her work promoting writing among Aboriginal youth, and won the 2014 Ontario Premier's Award for Excellence in the Arts. And this is Lee off paper. Mama Bear, anyone in the Indigenous community in Canada knows who Mama Bear Lee Maracle is. I've been warned about her. I've been sung her praises. I've known her, actually, I think longer than you even remember. Back again, when Born with a Tooth came out, I met you years and years ago, and I was a young little guy going, Lee Maracle, it's me, Joseph. I want to be your friend. And you can't just be Lee's friend. Listen to her laughter resonates across this nation, and I mean that in both literally and figuratively. To listen to Lee laugh, to know that laughter can be really funny, but it can also be really kind of cutting sometimes. Lee is a person who you respect. Lee is a woman, is a Kwei who demands, without demanding anything, demands our attention and our respect and our love and our listening to. We had a really interesting discussion today here at the library, Lee and I, and we talked, and I was really shocked because I've always looked at Lee and said, well, everyone says, anyone in the know knows, if you need advice about writing, if you need advice about protocol, if you need advice about life, about love, about what do I do now, you go to Lee Maracle. And there was a time when I heard her from across Turtle Island. I was in New Orleans shortly after The Orenda came out, and my last novel, and she was in Victoria, and I heard her voice. It traveled down the Moccasin Telegraph to me. It was like, Joseph, I think you should go talk to Lee. And those voices were right. And I did go to Lee. And Lee is a person who I basically opened up my heart to and said, listen, I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm trying to come back home all the time. And she saw that, she recognized that. And she understood, she listened to me. And I listened to her very carefully, and she has gently, yet with that kind of mother bear's firm grip, pointed me in the right direction and said, you got to do this, knowing full well that I'm probably going to piss her off again. But she always knows too. She's a person I go to. And today we were talking about elders and what is an elder, and it surprised me that Lee said, oh, I don't consider myself one. And I thought about that long and hard all day now. I've been thinking about that. And what I've realized that she might not yet recognize herself as an elder, but I think for every young Indigenous writer from my age down, it's not so young anymore, but for every Indigenous writer in this community, across this nation, across Turtle Island, we do look at Lee as somebody who is an elder, who is a voice you go and speak to. From the Haudenosaunee people, I've heard it. From the Anishinaabe people, I've heard it. From the Stolo people, I've heard it. Across the Mi'kmaq people, I've not met a nation of people in this country who doesn't say, oh, yeah, no, she is, if you need some learning, if you need some advice, if you need some love, if you need some good laughter, if you need some good medicine, it's Lee Maracle you go to. I first thought her name was Lee Mackerel, by the way, and I just want to share that. I was like, Miss Lee Mackerel, it's me, Joseph, I want to be your friend. And so, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Lee Mackerel Miracle. The miracle that is Lee Maracle. And she looks beautiful tonight.
I love you. Whew, this is, I don't think it gets better than this. I really don't. Such a day. I think this is the first time we have honored our writers. And I think it's because we have enough writers to honor our writers. And I do know that Thomas King helped make that happen. I first met him shaping the Anauken International School of Writing, where Richard Van Camp came from. Kalumpa Bob, the indomitable playwright, author of about 27 plays. That's way more than the Boys Club. And Philip Paul's son, Kevin, and his brother Chris, Ruth Ogilvie, my niece Joannis, all of these, my daughter Tanya, a playwright and a poet, all of these writers that came out of Anauken were helped by Thomas, and of course Michael and Dodgy and Margaret Atwood. Joy Kagawa. There were a number of people working on that. And the native people there, and this is something about me that I'd like you all to know, the native people that put this together were a small group of women, Joy Harjo, myself, Anna Lee Walters, I can't remember the Inuit woman's name, but we were picking berries when we made that decision. And we often make our decisions while we're harvesting. We make incredible lifelong decisions. And the decision to have a writers' conference was over a couple cups of coffee with Susan Blight and Cherie Demoline at First Nations House. And then it happens. So that's one of the things I want you to know about me. But the other one is a confession for the poor minister that was up here. He gave us our little plaques, and then he took them away. I'm sorry, it's such a stereotype. And he's here looking at you and not knowing why everybody's laughing because he hasn't done anything yet. But a great deal of our settler humor, our colonial humor is around that, you know. This guy comes, the Indian agent comes to the reserve, and I'll tell you this is short. And he's talking away, and everybody's saying, I can't remember the word, it's in Cree, but it means bullshit, right? And then they'd clap. And so he thinks they're really liking him, so keeps going. He's going to get them roads, he's going to get them this and that and the other. And they keep saying bullshit and clapping. Anyway, he thought he did a really good job, and he's going along there, and they're taking him back home, and they said, "Oh, watch out for the bullshit there." Okay. It was that kind of a sense of humor that I still managed to have. I also want to say that the first time I wrote something, I didn't actually write it, I spoke it. It was a very long spoken word piece called Bobby Lee. And I typed it, and then I got help editing it. And he edited a lot of the poetics out of it, and I accepted that. He was an editor. And then I tried to look for a publisher, and I found out that they don't publish Indians because we can't read. Wait a minute before you do that. I didn't feel that way. I thought I'd get 6 Aboriginal women I knew, and we'd go down Main and Hastings and see, and we'll ask 3,500 Native people exactly, because that's a bestseller in Canada, if they can read. And it turned out 2/3 of them could not. Residential school didn't teach us a damn thing. I found out 2 of my brothers couldn't read. Several of my aunts and uncles couldn't read. And my grandfather, who was an actor, was learning. My father read his scripts to him, but he was a rememberer. He could remember an entire 2-hour movie script on the first pass. I came from a smart family. So I decided to get a bunch of white folks together, because that's who reads, called Frontier College. And every grade 12 Native graduate of high school that I knew, that was 7. And we went around the province, and I talked to Trudeau. In those days, you could actually go up to Trudeau and say hi, and, and I'd say, I need some money, and they'd say, what do you want to do? And, then we do it, right? But now you can't easily talk to the Prime Minister. Anyhow, he gave us the opportunities for youth dollars, and we went around the province, and we taught 3,500 Native people to read, and had them sign a petition that said they would buy Lee Maracle's book when they learned to read. And that's how I got published. Because I said, that's a bestseller, man. Another thing I want to tell you, I grew up in North Vancouver, and I did grow up on the mudflats for the first 12 years of my life. I moved to Lynn Valley about the time you were born. I told this guy, that story about not getting published. He said, I would have published you. I said, I think you were about 12 then, Mark. Anyway, I just lost my story for just a second here. I want to tell you that we had a difficult time, and I realized that the reason that we were having a difficult time was that we were lonesome writers who had no colleagues. So when I heard about Tom King and saw this big Native guy, at first I thought he was a white professor, wanting to do another anthology, and I didn't want nothing to do with that, But anyhow, I saw him in Edmonton. I thought, oh my God, he's an Indian. So he hears my story, and he wants to get it published. Now, I know 2 sides of the publishing industry. One is printing, the actual printing stuff, and the other is, writing the stories. And he says, I'll try to get your story in. It's at the press right now. And I said, no, Tom, it's too late. No, he goes to the telephone. I can get it done, He thinks he can get it. Of course, they turned it down. But it was all my relations. And that was a book that was to promote writing of other people, not just himself. And that would create writers that he could count as colleagues. And I thought, ooh, that's a good way to go. And then we thought of the school and other things, and I tried to really create a space for young writers because of something that Maria Campbell said, it takes 30,000 books to educate a child. And I appreciate what you're saying about getting Canadians to read our work. Carolyn, I appreciate that, but I'm more concerned about getting our people to read our work. We don't have libraries in our schools in the north. We don't have libraries near our homes. Nearest one, I come from North Vancouver. Nearest library is 3 miles away from our reserve. That's ridiculous. There's white people living there too. They don't have the library either. And the bus used to go around our reserve, now it goes through it. But, you know, it's been hard. It's been a hard haul. I grew up in the first 12 years of my life, I was a permanent immigrant and a permanent child, along with my grandfather and so on and so forth. But I don't want to insult you, sir, but it was never tragic for us. And yes, we went to residential schools, my sisters and brothers. I didn't. I went to public school and got beat up every day, 4 times a day. I was okay with that because I could go home. Yeah, I could go home. And I got very, very tough. There's nothing that someone can say to me that will dampen my spirit. There is nothing that anyone can say to me. I don't care how big you think you are. I cannot be dampened. And so I want to hand that off to my young colleagues here, Leanne and Cherie and Susan for your art too, and Kalumpa. Don't take no for an answer, my mom used to say. Phone them, they don't know how to hang up. And don't take no for an answer. That's the Métis spirit, and it's the Indigenous spirit. And the reason I went with Mark Cote is I had handed my book to Douglas and McIntyre or some. They solicited it. It was the 3rd time that I got solicited for a book. And they sent it back to me. It's too ethnic. And I said thank you very much because I'd made it. I had wanted to write a really Salish story. And so here it is. And then I remembered Mark Cote saying that he would like to have one of my manuscripts. And that's why I went to you. And then I found out he came from Lynn Valley and went to school at the same time as my younger brother. I thought, oh my God, that's so cool. I've had an amazing journey, though. I think that's the thing that I need to let you all know. As you know, there isn't very many Indigenous women that have won great awards, and we outnumber men writers. And not just recently, but since the beginning. So if you're a woman and you're going to write, it's going to be difficult. But it will be amazing. You will dance with Thomas King, get the hug, the handsome old guy here. And people will tell you, you know that Joe Boyden thinks you're great? Okay, that's cool. You will have an amazing time. And there's many of us now. And I suggest that you get in touch with each other and communicate with each other. And Hayachkasiyam, hold each other up. That's how we say thank you. I don't know if you've ever been to Vancouver, but everyone should at least know that word. Hayachkasiyam, if you go to BC. Hayachkasiyam, we hold each other up. And Thomas King is like the salmon in our waters. The males jump and they bump the women over the falls. That's how it works. The men help the women. So when he named Leanne his emerging author, I thought, I was so right about him. He's a good man. Thank you very much.
The brilliance before us, ladies and gentlemen, Thomas King and Lee Maracle. So Miigwech, it's not going to be the first time I've asked you to teach me. It won't be the last time, but Hai Cheksiem? Hai Chka. Hai Chikasiem.
We are all family. Come on.
So, Miigwech. This brings to a close this evening formally. I want to let you know that afterwards, both Tom and Lee will be signing books. So please drop by, give them your love, give them your hello. I know you're going to want to informally and in person. Two of our greats, Indigenous or not, these are two of our amazing writers of Turtle Island. And so I bring the night to a close by thanking a few people. Of course, the Toronto Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Council, Canada Council for the Arts, of course, the Toronto Public Library, and all you do. Glad Day Bookshop on Yonge Street has been an incredible supporter of Indigenous people. Thank you, Miigwech. Snake Island drummers and dancers, brilliant, Miigwech, Miigwech. And especially to you, the audience, don't leave yet. The Snake Island drummers have agreed to do a traveling song for us. This is a song to take you home, careful and gentle and safely, and with love in your hearts and love for this beautiful evening we've had tonight. So again, Miigwech, thank you to all of you.